When I first started planning what to grow in my greenhouse, I was hyper focused on temperature as the critical factor. I was wrong. While my greenhouse stayed nice and warm, especially considering how cold it was outside, my plants did not thrive. I made a big mistake and learned one of my biggest lessons gardening. Now I'm going to share with you what I learned and what actually might be a more critical factor to garden planning so that you can avoid my missteps. Hi, I'm Randall and welcome to My Clever Garden. Over the years, I've transformed small urban spaces into thriving backyard grocery stores. And today, I'm going to dive into a common greenhouse planning mistake that I made. And it's not what you think. I'll share the steps I took to correct it. And whether you're a new gardener planning a garden for the first time, or a gardener who's planned for many years and many seasons, I think that this information is really going to help you. When I first started planning, I focused entirely on temperature. I thought if I can just keep the greenhouse warm enough, my plants will thrive. So when planning my greenhouse, I looked at it as if it was simply another grow zone. While that isn't a wrong way to think, it was incomplete. You see, the crucial factor that I was missing, that I realized, was light. The amount of light, especially in the winter. Here's what changed everything for me. In winter, not only does the length of light during the day drop dramatically, but so does the light intensity. So even if the temperature is the correct temperature and it's warm, plants can't thrive if they don't have enough light intensity. For example, lettuce is often thought of as both a cool season crop and one that doesn't actually appreciate too much intense sun or heat. In fact, if it does get that, it will get very unhappy and it will bolt. But lettuce actually requires a lot of light to grow and to be happy. With my newfound knowledge of light intensity and how it affected vegetables, I changed my planning process. Now, as part of my planning process, I use light intensity as another way to determine and sort and plan what and when to grow. So for those low light winter months, especially here like January, February, and March, where it's really low light intensity, I concentrate on vegetables like spinach, kale, and Asian greens. Then, in the parts of the year where the light is very intense and the days are very long, I prioritize things like tomatoes and cucumbers and squash and pumpkin and peppers. Here's how you can plan smarter for your greenhouse or garden with this newfound knowledge of light intensity. Start by making a list. Try with a top 10, 15, or 20. I like to look at grocery receipts because obviously I'm trying to produce as much food as possible and create a backyard grocery store. And if I look at grocery receipts across the year, it gives me a really good idea of what is my prioritized list. Then temperature is still important. So think about whether the vegetables are warm season or cool season and divide them into groups of warm and cool season vegetables. Then mark on each of them or next to them, depending on how you're doing it, if you're doing it on paper or the computer, which ones you're able to store or preserve. And indicate which ones you plan on storing or preserving. Just because you can store and preserve certain vegetables doesn't mean that's something you want to do. I'll give you an example. We found that we actually don't eat a lot of fresh or raw tomatoes, Most of the tomatoes that we're buying from the store, when you look at the volume, has to do with like sauces and cans of tomatoes and things like that. So we grow a lot of tomatoes for storage. Sure, I love fresh sliced heirloom tomatoes on a sandwich, but that's why this process of planning here is super, super helpful. Next, you want to use your newfound knowledge and research the light requirements and notate any of them that are particularly sensitive when it comes to light intensity. Either they don't need a lot of light intensity or they need a lot of light intensity. Now, I encourage everybody to do this, even if you've been doing it a long time, because I obviously was really surprised about lettuce and it's kind of fun to learn about it. So that's my recommendation to you. Next, before you get any further and you really start to determine where you're going to put what in your garden, in your greenhouse, you're going to want to add up and determine total size. Like, what area are you working with? Think about it like you're an architect, right? Because the next step is you're going to prioritize based on your setup, season, and the amount of harvest that's needed. And so having an idea of the size and then thinking about what time of year will really make it a lot easier for you to plan your garden. One thing that you'll want to think about that's a bonus tip is if you do want to grow lettuce or something like that during the winter, and you're going to have low light intensity like I do here, especially in January and February, is plant those a month or more into wherever you're planting them. Let's say it's in my greenhouse. What this does is the plant matures enough that it's in what they call the vegetative state, which is usually when you would start to harvest it, even if you're doing like cut and come again lettuce. And this way, the plant can actually continue to grow with less light for a while. It won't grow as fast, but it should be fairly healthy, and it won't produce as much food as often, but you'll still be able to harvest food from it. So that's the big lesson I learned. While temperature is super important, light intensity is a game changer when it comes to greenhouse planning. Because after all, if you're able to have a greenhouse and keep it relatively warm in the winter, you're probably doing so that you can grow vegetables. So whether you've been dreaming about a greenhouse or you have a greenhouse, when it comes to planning what varieties you're going to grow when, make sure you consider light intensity. If you'd like to learn more about growing in a greenhouse, check out my other video on winterizing your greenhouse. Thanks again so much for watching, and until next time, happy gardening.